think the common narrative after the conclusion of Into the Spider-Verse was that it was easily one of, if not the best movie of our generation. From beautifully illustrating the introduction to a brand new Spider-Man to audiences who probably have never read the comics before, and making him into his own character, while all at the same time wowing us with gorgeous scenes like these. I mean, that's an insane standard to hold yourself by. But after watching this movie not one, not two, but 3 different times, I think it's safe to say that Across the Spider-Verse did it again. Much like it was in the first movie, I think that the best way to describe it is that it doesn't really feel like you're watching an animated movie, but it feels more like you're watching how you would visualize reading a comic book, you know. And it's not just about the scenes that have a lot of motion and action going on that, you know, obviously look amazing in general, but it's more so the little things that they add in that complement that whole comic book like aesthetic. I think that aspect in particular is what takes this movie over the top. When one of the trailers dropped before the movie came out, one of the first things that people noticed was that when Miles was in the scene talking to the counselor with his parents, when his mom snaps at him, there's a little emote of the Puerto Rican flag, right? And it's little things like that that are scattered all throughout the movie. One of the first things that stood out to me personally was at the beginning of the movie, there was a scene where Gwen was talking to her dad, and as soon as she hugs him, her whole room lights up. And I think that that's a great illustration of who Gwen is as a character within the movie, because Gwen's character as a whole is reflected by her mood, right? And the colors that they choose in her scenes consistently represent that. And another thing that you probably noticed as well was the fact that in the movie, Spider-Punk says that he hates consistency, right? And his character is animated in a way that reflects that. You know, sometimes he's in black and white, sometimes he's in color, sometimes he's in various colors. The attention to detail in this movie is honestly insane, and it's those little subtle things that you may not notice on the first watch through that really make the big difference. And again, like I said before, these elements are all throughout the movie. I mean, you could probably keep watching this movie over and over again and still find something new. Character wise, I think Miles very clearly understands what his path in life is, and I think they do a great job showing that in both of his lives, right? One being Miles as this kind of corny, goofy ass student, right? And the other being Miles as Spider-Man. And I think that that puts Miles in kind of like an interesting dynamic, right? Where it's kind of like Miles versus his parents, not really versus, but you know, they're on opposite sides. And the same thing can be said about Miles and, you know, the rest of the Spider-Man. They don't necessarily see eye to eye because of Miles's past mistakes. And even still, Miles is considerate of the opposite side, you know, even when it may be detrimental to himself, which is vastly different from the usual, you know, cringy, rebellious teenager trope. And I think that's what makes Miles feel more close to home. There's definitely a bigger emphasis on Gwen's story this time around. In this movie, she's pretty much just as much of a main character as Miles is. I think that Gwen, just as much as Miles, is on a similar path. A lot of the obstacles that they face as Spider-Men or Spider-Women are paralleled in their personal lives as well. And I think that the same could be said about the way that they attempt to overcome those obstacles also. Overall though, I think they did an excellent job with both of these characters. My only negative about this movie was that there was very clearly a point in the movie where they're winding down to prepare for the next movie. But don't get me wrong, up until that point, I was glued to the screen. But when I did get to that point, I said to myself, I was like, there's no way this is the end of the movie, right? And it was the end. So this movie doesn't really feel like one movie, which it's not. It's, you know, it's a two-parter. It's like it takes you all the way to the top of the hill, but it never pushes you down. But don't get me wrong, I don't think that takes away any points from the movie at all. This movie was absolutely amazing. So only time will tell whether or not the next movie lives up to the standards set by this movie.